Well, an entrepreneur never stops working, and this is Radio Entrepreneurs. We're deep into August, and we continue to stream stories of entrepreneurship, leadership, personnel development, and whatever's going on with an organization or any new organization. And every week, we like to check in with Marc Z from Marc Z Legal Staffing for our Marc Z Moment. Welcome back, Marc.
Thanks, Jeff. Great to be here as always. Hope your summer is going terrifically in every way.
And I'm sure, Marc, you haven't lost a set all summer, unless it's to your wife.
You're kind, but I've lost a lot of sets this summer. My wife is getting better and better, and I'm getting worse or plateauing. But you know what? It's just great to get out there in the beautiful weather we're now having.
Well, I play tennis as well, as you know, and sometimes I
Yes.
look to my right and I see Father Time saying, "Sorry, buddy."
Yeah. The other day I was you can appreciate it because you've overcome a lot of injuries. Is My wife was moving me back and forth in the court, and I went for one and then I went for another, and I slid and both my feet separated, and she looks at me, she paused, and she said, "No more injuries, no more injuries." So I'm like, you're right. So it's like, let the ball go or don't move in this direction.
Yeah, give me a couple of years of no more injuries. So, Marc, what's happening in the world of entrepreneurship for you this week?
Well, you know how I always talk about, like, in our office, sometimes it's like a lab for employment situations or employment issues and recruiting. One of the topics that seems to be resonating even more lately because of the different Massachusetts laws in terms of background checks and what can be checked and what can't be checked, and the 7-year criminal background check, are more and more organizations and companies are what you call, not only would, like, for example, when somebody's usually interviewing with a company, they want to know more about the company or meeting people in the company, they'll research them and look them up online and go through the whole information. What companies and interviewers are doing more and more on candidates is what they call Googling them, researching them. And what's interesting is that process that they're doing it, sometimes they're just doing it simply. They're saying, "Oh, I'm meeting Jeffrey Davis. I'm going to Google him." And with you, your whole background, your accomplishments come up. But with some people, it could be a Jeffrey Davis that's not you. And when you Google him, it could show that Jeffrey Davis was arrested, or it could show Jeffrey Davis resigned something due to something. Those aren't things that come up in a background check, and you're totally allowed to research or quote Google somebody and find their background. And that's leading to some decisions that on one hand can be helpful as a guide for employers, and it's not illegal to do. But on the other hand, in our world about discrimination or hurting people's chances of not being employed, when there could be good reasons why this information is on there. So, for example, there could be something on there that shows a Jeffrey Davis. First of all, if it's not you, but say another Jeffrey Davis. So we're looking at that Jeffrey Davis, and number one, people look at that Jeffrey Davis. Oh, that could be you. Well, once they figure out it's not you, then that Jeffrey Davis has a situation where they had assault and battery that came on. Well, any of the background checks, that didn't come up. And so what employers will say, "Oh, I'm gonna pass on him, even though everybody liked this candidate, because there's an assault and battery." Well, what happens is, if you researched it, like an example that I had, we had somebody who was a candidate that their background check was good and everything was good and they were being hired. Employer looked them up, assault and battery. What happened was that person was at a wedding, and all of a sudden his date and another who was a bridesmaid and another bridesmaid got into a fight. And so the police had to be called. And when the police called, he was holding down the date of the other bridesmaid. So they then had to go to court, and they were all arrested. And so his immediately was dismissed, but it was on the write-up of the newspaper.
Marc, lucky for me, the only thing I could probably hold down would be a stuffed animal. So I'm not known for being a tough guy, but bigger mouth than tough guy. But You bring up a really good point, because in the course of my career of living in the Boston area, I've met 6 other Jeffrey Davises. And you're right. If you're not doing the proper search and the wrong data comes up, you could destroy someone's career.
Right.
Also, with AI, if you have a disgruntled old employee and they want to fiddle with the web and fiddle with pictures, you could do something that's kind of destructive and counterproductive. So doing the right background check, I think, is really key. And I think the point for you is, and it's what I see in most things with work, there are no shortcuts. You got to do things right.
Right. Do a background check on the person, find out the information. But the other thing is, be proactive. If you're with a firm or company or an organization, yes, use that as a guide, but don't be immediately jumping to conclusions. Maybe ask the person about it. When I looked you up, I saw this. It didn't come up in a background check. Can you explain it? And the same thing with a candidate. If a candidate knows that there's something on the internet about them, that they get an interview and they're doing very well, but if somebody ultimately researches and Googling, that would come up, be proactive, explain it. And if the company or the firm said we're still going to we're still going to give that consideration, well, that's their call. But at least you've had the chance to explain it, and at least you've been proactive and not let other decisions affect you.
I think that's very good. And Mark, if somebody wants to understand more about screening candidates, background checks, and how to go things over, same things that our illustrious Phil Sharkey talks about every week, how would they find you?
Well, first of all, go on our wonderful Radio Entrepreneurs website, radioentrepreneurs.com. Myself and a lot of the other reporters will be on it, and as well as great content. Google Marc Z, M-A-R-C, and the letter Z, marczlegal.com, MARCZLEGAL.com, and 617-338-1300.
And the good news is that anybody who likes these Marc Z moments, you'll find Mark next week on Radio Entrepreneurs.